Welcome or welcome back. My name's David Newton and thank you for joining with me on my vlog number 4 for the year. This is February 2023. This week was an interesting week. The Reserve Bank lifted the interest rates up 0.25%, which are now up to 3.35%. For the cash rate at the RBA locally here in Sydney. Now it's quite interesting. Why would I mention even this on my vlog? Well, it goes back to one thing. They always say mortgage holders will suffer this and mortgage holders will suffer that, and particularly those who are on fixed rate mortgages. Pretty soon 800,000 of those will come off fixed rate mortgages, and they will be back to paying regular amounts. So it's going to be interesting for them. But I say, what about renters? In Australia at the moment, we're going through what's known as a rental squeeze, where there is something like, on average, 1%, and in some cases down to 0.2 or 0.4% availability of rental stock in regional areas around Australia. It is so much tougher for people to rent or change the rental that they're in, and that is affecting the health of the economy. For example, if you got a job offer and you had to move across from one state to another state, you probably wouldn't be able to take up that job offer because you wouldn't be able to find any rental accommodation amongst the hundreds of other people who are looking in the same suburban or rural area. So they're the challenges that we're currently at the moment. It's funny in a way because history is sort of like repeating itself. We've got a situation in Australia where the history that we had in this particular area was with us back in the 1950s and the 1960s. Where there was a situation where Australia went through a housing crisis and a slum removal board was created. If I'm correct, Arthur Caldwell was one of the proponents of this, amongst several others, to create large housing blocks in the inner suburban areas of, say, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and places like that. So essentially most capital cities and a few regional centres had large housing blocks created, and also quite a lot of public housing was created in order to alleviate the rental stress and also the housing ownership stress that was going on post-World War II, which had been delayed for quite some time whilst the country got back on its feet in those years. So why is it happening all again? Well, also, like the 1960s in particular, in the 1960s, if you go back to some of the newspapers then, there was a situation where they were saying house prices were rising at a faster rate than housing buyers could actually purchase them. So there was a runaway real estate situation. And much the same as today, well, of course, with the higher interest rates, housing prices have gone down a bit, but not nearly sufficient enough for first home buyers to purchase a home. So we're saddled between these different realities. And if you're building a home, that's even worse, because there has been a lot of situations recently where there's been housing building collapses with housing, and that's made it difficult for people to move into a new home because maybe their builder might have gone under, and as a result of that they're left out in the cold, in some cases quite literally left out in the cold because they can't rent anywhere. They're probably living in a caravan or some other form of temporary accommodation, and they're waiting to move into that new house that they were hoping was going to be built, or maybe a new block of flats that they had purchased a small tiny deposit on, but for whatever reason that deposit will be unrecoverable because their builder has gone collapsed. I find it quite interesting living between Sydney and Melbourne that we live in what would otherwise be a fairly prosperous society. Hey, we've got wonderful things here in the harbour here in Sydney. I jumped on a ferry ride on the Friday afternoon and crossed between Circular Quay through to Neutral Bay. And when I got off at the Neutral Bay wharf, it was lovely to have this lovely flowing breeze, you might say, straight off the bay area there at Neutral Bay at Hayes Street Wharf, whilst waiting briefly for the bus to arrive to take me back up to the top of Wickham Road at the corner of Military Road where the bus goes to, and to get off there and to walk back home. Hey, we live in a wonderful area here. This is a really, really nice part of town, and Neutral Bay has quite a lot of wonderful views. Not far from me there's Middle Harbour views, and on the other side there's also views of the harbour itself. If I walk down to the Ridge Street overpass area, I've got wonderful views, and even in some spots there walking along Military Road, not far from where the main bus stop is at Watson Street, there's also wonderful views of the city looking back there beside the main roadway. So it's really quite a spectacular area here. However, right next to where I live, late at night, there's been construction going on for the freeway upgrade, and also for where the Northern Beaches tunnel will be going through. So I've had to put up with late night construction going on for usually anywhere from 2 or 3 nights a week. And if I can say one thing, yes, that makes getting to sleep very difficult. Should I move or find another place to move? Well, you've just heard me talk about the current situation of rental availability in Australia is at an all-time low at the moment, and this construction will be going on for months, maybe even years ahead, because there's quite a lot to do there. In this particular area here, they're trying to do some kind of an upgrade as to where the exit ramps and the entry ramps are going into the freeway, and also how that connects back into where the new underground tunnel is for the Northern Beaches area, which is yet a whole other different spaghetti network of where the buses and cars and trucks and everything are going to go, because they can't keep pumping that out on Military Road forever and a day. Military Road is just so full of traffic, Monday to Friday particularly, and on the weekends it's probably even worse because everyone wants to go to the beaches. So even if they're not getting in the water, they're wanting to go to the cafes and restaurants near the beaches, so they're driving as far north as Dee Why or to Avalon, to Manly. They're going to all of those places in order to enjoy getting away while they can on the weekend. So why would you want to think about the accommodation situation as it is? Well, I think probably one of the big things is that the accommodation situation highlights one thing, and that is that if you can work on your financial independence, and if you can work upon earning that extra income and saving for something for a better life, that's one thing you need to hold in focus, because you can't take anything for granted that the situation that you're in will perpetuate and keep going on and on forever. At some stage we have to make changes, we might have a change of job or a change of business, so you always need to work and think further ahead as to be prepared for if you need to change your current situation. And that's why I say it's also a bit like, there's a line out of the movie Wall Street where his work buddy Marvin is having a cup of coffee, or I think it is, and he says to Bud Fox, he says, we're only one trade away from humility, Bud. And I think that quote sums it really up, is that you can't take things for granted that they're always going to be the same. No matter how secure your current situation is, there's always a possibility that things could change at a moment's notice or impending somewhere down the track, and you have to make provisions for making those changes. So it's important that you work on things like building a second income, working towards having the future that you want, and to not let other distractions get in the way. In fact, to be proactive and to work towards those solutions as best you can. For the next week, I'm looking at doing a few other interesting things, which will include public speaking with my public speaking club, and also visiting the Professional Speakers Association meeting. So I'm looking forward to next week. And I've also got a Sunday afternoon event with my social group as well coming up in a week's time. So next week's looking really, really great. So once again, thank you for coming along to my vlog today, and I look forward to speaking with you soon. And have a look at some of my other wonderful business building videos on my website. And I invite you to subscribe and leave some comments below yourself if you have any thoughts about Australia's housing situation. I'd be very interested to hear what you have to say. This is David Newton speaking. Looking forward to speaking with you again soon.